Hi everyone. Today is the Bengali New Year, which we call Pohela Boishak. Happy New Year, Shubho Navabarsho, which is how we say Happy New Year in Bangla. Um, I'm here today with my friend Priyanka Taslim, and we are going to be answering a few of the questions you guys asked us on Twitter, just about Bangladesh, and everything to do with being Bangladeshi and Bangladeshi history and culture. We are super excited to dive in. So I am Adiba Jaigirdar. I am the author of The Henna Wars and the upcoming Honey and Issues Guide to Fake Dating. And I'm going to let Priyanka introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Priyanka Taslim. I'm so happy to be here with Adiba to talk about Bangladesh and our new year. I am the author of the upcoming The Love Match from Salam Reads, an imprint of Simon & Schuster in 2022. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for joining me. Let's see. So Gabby asked us a lot of questions. So her first question is, if Bangladesh were to host a World Cup or similar, what would be the mascot?
I think that's a pretty easy question to answer. I think both of us probably have the same creature in mind. Most likely the Royal Bengal Tiger would be our mascot.
Gabby's second question is, what's the most popular sport in Bangladesh and are you good at it?
My natural instinct would be to say cricket, but I think we ended up discovering it was something else, right?
Yeah, so, well, I don't know if I would say that like that is the most popular sport, but our national sport is actually not cricket. Our national sport is kabaddi. So kabaddi, for people who don't know what it is, I mean, I don't really know what it is either, to be honest. I played it when I was like a kid and I lived in Bangladesh, but it's basically the sport where you have two teams and the way you play it is you have to like hold your breath and you have to say like kabaddi, kabaddi, kabaddi for the entire time that you're like playing, that you're like making a move. I don't really know like what you actually have to do in the game because it's been a long time since I've played kabaddi, but I think it's mostly played in Bangladesh and probably in India. I'm not sure if it's played in Pakistan or other South Asian countries, but definitely Bangladesh and India because they have like the kabaddi like matches and stuff that you see on Bangladeshi TV. But I don't think kabaddi is as popular in Bangladesh as cricket is, to be honest. So in terms of popular sport, I would also say cricket.
I can't play any sports, so to answer that part of the question, I don't remember ever playing kabaddi. I've played baseball before, which is a little similar to cricket. We don't really play cricket in the US, but I do know that it's super popular in Bangladesh.
Yeah, so like I said, I remember playing kabaddi when I was a kid, but I don't think I was good at it, and I literally like have no memory of it basically. I can't play cricket. I did play cricket when I was younger, mostly like with my brother and his friends. I think I was okay at it. I actually know the rules of cricket and like kabaddi, so that's a pretty good start. But yeah, I can play cricket. I could probably still play it. Gabby's next question is, to someone spending only one day in Bangladesh, what would be the can't miss places to go?
I think it really depends on what you're interested in. There's a lot, if you like nature, Bangladesh is just filled with beautiful, lush, green things. So there's, there's the Sundarbans, and then there's tea gardens and just the beach, Cox's Bazar. So it really depends on what you want to see. And if you want to see nature, those are some things that you might go to.
Yeah, there's a lot of really beautiful natural places. So, I wouldn't recommend if you're a fan of nature, I wouldn't recommend like staying in Dhaka because Dhaka is like very urban and quite overcrowded and stuff. So that's our capital city. I would recommend, going outside, going to like, I think one of my favorite places to visit in Bangladesh was the tea gardens. We went to Sri Mongo. And we were actually driving from Dhaka to Sylhet when we went to the tea gardens. And it was like a really long drive. It's like 7 or 8 hours, because, we took our time. We stopped at the nice tea gardens. We took like pictures. We had like a nice lunch and stuff. But that was a really, really nice trip, and it was really beautiful. So I would recommend, doing something like that. If you're interested in learning about like the history of Bangladesh, I would recommend, staying in Dhaka. And you can go to our museums. We have a national museum, where, you can learn like a lot of the history of Bangladesh, like different parts of it. It is like, from what I remember, it's self-guided, so that might be a little bit difficult. I can't remember if there's English. I'm sure that there is, right? Because it's a museum.
It probably is.
Yeah, I'm sure that there is. You can also go to, there's a museum of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and Sheikh Mujib is our like founding father. And his like family is still like in politics in Bangladesh now. So obviously like him and his family are really, really important both to the history and the present of Bangladesh. So, I would recommend visiting there. And then we also have like our parliament. We have our Shohid Minar, which is like a monument for the like people, for the martyrs of the Bangla language movement. Like Dhaka University, which is where like the movement kind of started. Um, do you speak some of the language? Can you write it? What's your relationship with it?
I can speak it. I can't read or write it at all. And that's really hard. That's pretty common, I think, in the US diaspora, unless someone like grew up in Bangladesh and then came. I was born and raised here, and my parents tried to put me in like Bengali lessons for a little bit, and I hated it at the time because it was like, oh no, school and then more school, and then like, going to the imam and studying the Quran too. So it was like, no, I don't want to do this. And they took me out of it. But now as an adult, I do regret it. I wish I could like read and write it, but I am glad that I can speak it at least.
Yeah, I can speak it. Obviously, like we probably have about the same level, because I speak with my family, and I'm assuming you do as well, though we speak different dialects. Um, and I can read it very badly. It takes me a long time just to read like a tiny bit. And I can write it, but also very badly. And honestly, my sister-in-law was very rude to me because once, when I was teaching a class, actually my last class, my students, like they made up the whole board and they wrote something in each of their languages. I teach ESL, or I taught ESL for anybody who doesn't know. So they all wrote, I can't remember what they wrote. Maybe they wrote like goodbye teacher or something. But they all wrote something like in their language on the board. So then they're like, oh, can you write something in like your language? So I wrote something in my language. And then I took a picture of the board to like remember it. And I was showing it to my sister-in-law, like, oh, look, this is something cute that my students did for me. And she was like laughing at my handwriting, which is extremely rude because my sister-in-law literally grew up in Bangladesh like her whole life. And she speaks it and reads it and like writes it very well, versus me who moved to Saudi Arabia when I was 2 years old and moved to Ireland when I was 10. So obviously my reading and writing level is very low. And I'm about to go off into a rant, but this is like, this really annoys me about like Bangladeshi people, because I know that my cousins who are like Americans and stuff, when they go back to Bangladesh and they can speak Bangla, but they just have like an accent, and obviously their vocabulary level is like a bit lower. People will make fun of them. So then they get very embarrassed about speaking it, which is just awful the way that people do that, because it really discourages people from the diaspora from even trying to like learn our language. Like the fact that I can write it despite not having any practice in it since I was 10 years old, I think is a pretty big achievement. But yeah, I guess that's my relationship with the language.
Yeah, I would say when I went to Bangladesh, basically everyone was just like shocked that I could like, I think they said that I spoke it pretty well,
Mm,
um, despite, uh, just learning it in the US. So that was good, I guess. But I don't know if it was like, when like big people, like white people will be like, "Oh, your English is so good," like that. Maybe it
I
was a
don't
little
think
like that.
Bangladeshi people do that. I feel like they would insult you if they think your Bangla is bad.
That's good to know. So that means that my Bangla is actually okay.
To be honest, Sileti people are also very rude to like me and like my brother and my sister and stuff because so for anybody who doesn't know, me and Pri are both from a region of Bangladesh called Sylhet, where we have like a dialect, but Sileti people will say it's a language. We don't know what it is. There's no consensus. So Sileti people speak Sileti, which is like kind of distinctive from Shuddha Bangla, which is, like the general language of Bangladesh. So I only speak Shuddha Bangla and I don't speak Sileti because my parents never taught me that. So sometimes when we go to Sylhet and we like speak with Sylheti people and we speak in Shuddha Bangla, they'll be really rude to us and they'll be like, don't speak if you can't speak in Sylheti.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that is also extremely rude.
No, definitely. I didn't have that experience because Sileti is the only like dialect I learned. But I've kind of had the opposite experience where, for example, like, you know, people would tell me like, "Oh, you're saying that wrong," and it's like, "Am I saying it wrong, or am I just using my own dialect?" Or like, I remember there was an example. I used the word like "afa," which is how we refer to older sister. And then someone was like, "Oh, like only servants in Bangladesh use afa, and the rest of us use something else like appa or something like that." And I was like, "Servants? That's not my personal experience." So I kind of experienced the opposite, I guess, where people who speak more formal Shuddha Bangla, or I don't even know what other dialect. We have a lot of dialects, by the way. We have more dialects than some places have languages. So yeah, that's what I've experienced where people kind of like, and I'm already diaspora, so I already have like a little bit of insecurity about that. And people will be like, "Oh no, you're using like you're talking like a servant." So that was my experience. Maybe the message from all this should be like, leave people alone no matter what they speak.
Honestly, yeah, but Bangladeshi people. Um, the next question is, since I can write a whole essay about my country's flag, do you like yours? Why or why not?
I think we like our flag, right? It has a lot of deep meaning, and we're dressed like our flag today. The green of our flag stands for like the lushness of the country because it's just such a green, beautiful country in that way. We have the Sundarbans, which is like this big forest and like swampland.
It's the
And
largest mangrove forest in the world.
yeah, see, I just got my second corona vaccine, guys, and I'm like barely here. I can barely remember things, but yes, like Adiba said, we have a lot of like natural beauty there. And then the red stands for like the blood of the martyrs who died during our language movement. So,
Well, not just during the language movement, just died during like,
in general,
I guess, because we have a lot of like conflict, a lot of death. So there's a lot of blood that was shed.
yes, our country has a very unfortunate history, and I guess because of that, the fact that it's like sticking out and very determined is a good sign. Like you can't get rid of us that easily. We've had a lot of terrible things happen. I found out about it like a cyclone in like the year that I was born as well that killed like 100,000 people, and I was like, oh my god! Between all the genocides and now the cyclone, what the heck was happening over there?
I mean, also like basically every year we have like a big flood as well. I think a couple of years back when I was there, it was like the biggest, like the worst flood that we've ever had. Um, and it wasn't just Bangladesh, obviously, it was in like a lot of different Asian countries. But it was really bad in Bangladesh. And I went to, was I in Sylhet or was I in Chittagong? But I think I was in Sylhet, and you could literally see like even like the towns like where the water had risen. Well, I've been in Bangladesh a couple of times during floods, but because this was like when I was an adult, I remember it quite well. So yeah, we have a lot of natural disasters, yes.
Global warming has not been great on us. I think there's predictions about how the country will be underwater within a certain period of time. So hopefully
I
that
think it's
doesn't
80
happen.
years.
Yeah, hopefully we
Well,
can
it's
reverse
already
that.
happening. So unless we can reverse climate change, it is going to keep happening. And the people who are most affected by it are like the people in the, because it's the Sundarbans that has like significantly gotten underwater. Um, and most of the people who like live there are like indigenous people, or like just poor people as well. So obviously like the most, what's the word, the
Vul-
most like, sorry,
I said vulnerable, maybe.
yeah, the most vulnerable people are the ones who are affected by it. So it's really sad. um what are some of the prettiest Bangladeshi celebrities?
I think because we're both diaspora, we don't know as many celebrities for Bangladeshi, um, particularly because like in the diaspora, it tends to be more accessible to find, for example, like Bollywood, uh, no matter who you are in the South Asian diaspora, and it's not as easy to find Bangladeshi media, especially like that's as well made. So I don't honestly know any.
Yeah, and I think even in Bangladesh, like Bollywood and Western media is more popular than I guess Bangladeshi media. um so yeah, I wouldn't know either. I honestly don't think I know any Bangladeshi celebrities. Best Bangladeshi movies or TV shows. So the exact same answer as the previous one. Most fun Bangladeshi holidays.
So many of them.
We have
Because
a
our
lot of
people
holidays.
love food, so and most of them are like food aligned. I would say like especially when you're a kid, Eid is always a lot of fun. And I spent Eid only once in Bangladesh, but it was just like a big hubbub and everybody was there and you
Was
know,
it Rujarid or Kurbaniri?
Qurban Eid. So that was actually a little bit
Okay.
traumatizing because
Oh.
that was my first time seeing um for the uninitiated, Rosari Eid is the one that follows Ramadan, and that I would say that one's probably the most fun because you spent 30 days, um, fasting, and so you get basically you have like this big party at the end of it, and there's so much food to kind of celebrate the fact that you made it through the 30 days of the fast. And then the other one, the Qurbani Eid, is the Eid of the sacrifice, I believe is the translation. And so for the Qurbani Eid, you see like halal sacrifice of at the time. So I did see that happen, and I was pretty young at the time. I think I was like 8, so that was kind of scary. But afterward, like all of the like the activity was fun, and yeah, I would say Eid is pretty fun, even in the U.S. or like in the diaspora. As a kid, Eid is very fun. As you grow up, I think it becomes less fun. But I would say like Westerners probably say the same thing about like Christmas or whatever. It's more fun when you're a kid.
Yeah, I think I agree with you about Eid, but actually for me when I was a kid, I think Qurbanir Eid was more fun than Rujar Eid because oh, by the way, you can hear like the difference in our like dialects because I say Rujar Eid and Pri says Rozar Eid, right? So these are the difference between our dialects. But yeah, for me, Qurbanir Eid was actually I think more fun because I grew up in Bangladesh, so obviously from the beginning, I was seeing like the Qurbani being done. And actually, so I moved to Saudi Arabia when I was 3. So a lot of the time I would actually spend Qurbani Eid in Saudi. Qurbani Eid in Saudi was a lot of fun. Much more fun than in Bangladesh because obviously in Bangladesh, like you have like crowds and everything. So like unless you go to the village to do Qurbani Eid, it can be like not as I don't know the word, but like in the village, obviously you see like the Qurbani being done. But in Saudi, like my dad and my brother, or like the men of the family, they would go to sometimes to like another town to get like a cow usually, and they would like select the cow for kurbani, and then they would bring it back to like our town, and they would put it like bring it to like the slaughterhouse, and then we would go to visit the cow like every day or like every once in a while, until Kurbani Eid. And then on the day of Kurbani, we would all go and then we would watch like the slaughter. Like for non-Muslim people, this might sound like a bit much, but this is like, you know, the tradition. And um, I think like honestly, like I think it's for me as like a kid, I think watching that, it taught me a lot. I think it taught me to like see like life in a different way, and I think it does, as like as a kid, I think it teaches you to value life in a very different way than if you don't, like if that's not really a part of your life. But yeah, so we would watch that, and then obviously like the meat would be like distributed and stuff, and even then like I remember in our village in Bangladesh when we did Qurbani Eid, you would literally, I would see my like great aunts and stuff divide up the meat and then like, you know, give a portion to like the poor people in the village, give a portion to like the family, give a portion for us. So that's like what you do with the meat for the Qurbani Eid. You divide it into 3 portions. One portion goes to the poor, one portion for family and friends, one portion for yourself. Because Qurbani Eid is really like about that community. So you could literally see all of this like happening in real time in Bangladesh and in Saudi Arabia. So I thought like that was really cool. And in Saudi, like because we had like a lot of Bangladeshi families all around, we would always like celebrate Qurbani Eid all together. We would have like a lot of parties and stuff. So that was super fun. So yeah, I used to love Qurbani Eid when I was a kid. Not so much now because here you literally don't do anything.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, definitely. I think what I like about our religion is that so much of it is about generosity. And so when I celebrated Eid the one time in Bangladesh, I think I did it twice, but the other time I was a baby, so I have like no idea. That is something that I remember. Like I was scared of the kurbani happening, but after that, I remember like the meat being divided and being given to the poor. And that's a big thing during like Rosari Eid as well, you know, donating money. So
Mhm.
that's nice. But it is more fun as a kid than as an adult.
Yeah. Um, the next question is from Alyssa. A lot of people in the West don't know much about any South Asian countries other than India. What would you say are some of the biggest differences between Bangladesh and other South Asian countries, India, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, etc.?
Okay. A lot of little differences that I think people wouldn't recognize just seeing us from a broader scope. But one of the big things is our language, and that's why we had our language movement in the first place. Because when we were East Pakistan, again, I just took that COVID dose, so not everything's working up here, but when we were East Pakistan, when the British left, they separated um, South Asian to different portions, and they didn't do that great of a job. West Pakistan, which is now Pakistan, simply because of a shared religion, and they gave West Pakistan a lot of power over us. And it's a similar relationship to like Imperial Japan with other East Asian countries, where like Pakistan abused this power. And they declared like, you know, the language that they speak would be our official language. And that's where our independence movement stemmed from, this fight for our particular Bengali language. So that's one thing that sets us apart.
Um, I'm trying to think of other things. I feel like in terms of food, our food is quite similar, like across the board, I think, especially between like Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. But we do have like specific dishes that would be like different from Pakistan and India. And we would have like, for example, like biryani is like a South Asian dish, but then I think in different regions you have very specific types of biryani. So even in like Sylhet, we have a specific biryani in Sylhet. We have specific biryanis from Dhaka. So, you know, we have like specific dishes like that. Um, And I guess, again, in terms of language, like Pri said before, we also have like all the different dialects from like all the different parts of Bangladesh. So like obviously in India, you have West Bengal, where I think, I could be wrong, but I think most people in West Bengal speak Shuddha Bangla. Um, do you know, like, do they have other dialects in West Bengal?
Not sure, but I think my instinct would be that that's the case, but I'm not
Yeah.
100% sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I went to Kolkata, everybody there was speaking Shuddha Bangla. Even though their Shuddha Bangla, it does sound a little bit different from the Shuddha Bangla that I spoke. Like they're almost exactly the same, but it's like, you know, you can tell that there's like a difference when you are like a native speaker. It was kind of like that. Um, but yeah, we have like a lot of different dialects across Bangladesh. We have like different dialects depending on like regions. Um, what else sets us apart from other South Asian countries?
I know we've talked about like our diaspora experience being frequently different from other South Asian countries. And I think part of that has to do with, like we discussed before, Bangladesh is a very young country. So our food video was actually during our 50th independence. So we're a very young country in that regard. But we've also experienced a lot of national tragedies, both man-made genocides and then like natural disasters. And so because of that, Bangladesh as a country is often, I think, perceived as like incredibly poor, which is not to say that there are not parts of India and Pakistan that are not, but because those countries are older, they've had more of a chance to establish, I would say, a national wealth, particularly in the diaspora. So a lot of the early diaspora of those particular countries tended to be like very wealthy people with like very big skill sets that were welcome. Whereas for a lot of Bangladeshi diaspora, it tends to be like working class. This is, of course, not across the board. We're not a monolith at all. But that's something like you'll often hear, for example, Singapore was built on the labor of Bangladeshis, or like in Saudi Arabia. Adiba can talk more about that because she grew up in Saudi Arabia as well. But we're seen as laborers around the world. We're seen as working class, and part of that has to do with like the sheer amount of tragedy that we've experienced. So I think there's this idea of like this perceived proximity to whiteness that some other diaspora can have. And while it's not universal, I would say most of the time, like Bangladeshis do not have that same proximity to whiteness because we tend to like be working class. We tend to grow up around each other within a very like close community. And so, for example, there was an article recently about how Bangladeshis in the US were like the highest Asian subgroup to vote Democrat. Like it was like 90 something percent, very high. Most of the other groups also had pretty high amounts, but like we tend to be very liberal because I think we experience, like people assume South Asians are rich. That's not always the case, particularly with Bangladeshis, I think.
Yeah, I think speaking a little about, I guess, over here in Ireland and the UK, well, we don't have a big diaspora Bangladeshi community in Ireland, but I can speak to the UK. I have a lot of family there. I mean, you do too, right? Honestly, like I think a lot of people call London like a second Sylhet because there are so many Sylheti people there. But I remember seeing a statistic, or I remember seeing like a study about like British Bangladeshis and how in terms of like it, in terms of like finances and stuff, in terms of like discrimination, um, like Bangladeshis in Britain were essentially on the same level as Black British people. And obviously Black British people are extremely discriminated against. And so are Bangladeshi people in Britain. And I think, you know, a lot of that has to do with everything that Pri brought up. There is like a big Bangladeshi community in the UK, and I do think like they suffer a lot of discrimination, and because people might see in the UK, you know, there are like South Asians in like government and stuff, but you will notice that they're all Indians or Pakistanis. And I mean, you know who I'm talking about. It's like Priti Patel and stuff, who are, you know, we don't claim her, but I think like part of that is a lot of South Asians, but a particular group of South Asians have been able to like rise to certain ranks. So once they do, they have that proximity to whiteness, and then they're, you know, they feel free to kind of subjugate the rest of us, and close all those opportunities that they maybe once had. But you will notice that most of the time it is not like Bangladeshis, because we do not get to rise to those ranks because we have this history, because most of us are working class, and we're also often like darker skinned. Well, in India, I think, you know, it really depends what region you're from, but definitely we are most of the time much darker skinned than most Pakistanis. And that is also because, you know, we are laborers and because we are working class. So yeah, there is like, you know, our history really informs the way that we're perceived worldwide and the way that we access things worldwide in the diaspora as well.
I think we face a lot of like intra-community bigotry as well. So for
Mhm.
us, it's not just, you know, white people are bigoted against us. It's that within our own communities, like Pakistani and Indian people will also be bigoted against us. So for example, with like the Rohingya crisis, a lot of in India, I remember they would say that they didn't really want any Rohingyas coming into India because they said, oh, these are just Bangladeshis that are trying to like escape into our country. So there's definitely like a lot of bias against us. And sometimes it's like rooted in anti or in Islamophobia, but then you also have like the Pakistanis who have frequently seen us as less and
Mhm.
subjugated us throughout our history and still see us as less. So that's actually what I noticed when I went to visit my family in the UK, that the way that Pakistanis see Bangladeshis sometimes, because here I don't see a lot of Pakistanis as much in my particular, like, you know, occasionally, but like there it's like so many South Asians, as you said. So
I think
yeah,
one of the big problems is that Pakistanis don't really learn the history of what happened, or maybe they learned the wrong history. I don't really know. I don't know what history Pakistanis are learning, but from the Pakistanis that I have known, they definitely seem to have this idea either that we are lesser, or there's like, oh, like we're all South Asian, so you know it's cool. But it's like, well, there's literally a brutal history where you committed genocide against my people. And
yeah,
you know, like the thing is, it's not even like, oh, it was generations ago. It's like that was literally like my great grandfather.
yeah.
So it's like a very present history. You know,
Yeah.
like there are people alive who can tell you that like all of these histories. Um, but definitely in my experience, like I have met people who have said to me like, oh, people always told me like they would make jokes about like Bangladeshis, like other South Asians would make jokes about Bangladeshis. They would say like, oh, like at least you're not Bangladeshi, ha ha ha, so you're good. So that's definitely not fun to hear that, you know, other South Asians, specifically Indians and Pakistanis, like are making those jokes about us or speaking about us like that. But I definitely think for the most part, Indians and Pakistanis either don't know the history of what has happened, specifically Pakistanis, because they are the ones who are like our oppressors, or they just believe that we're all like one big happy family, which is also not true.
Yeah, I actually discussed this a little bit in my novel. Obviously, it's a romantic comedy, so there's not going to be, you know, discussion of this in depth. But my protagonist Zara's best friends are Pakistani, so it talks about how there is this idea of like a diaspora unity when you're faced with outside oppression, and you kind of band together because of that. But at the same time, you can't forget this very recent history. As Adiba said, like it's a very present part of our history. It's not just the past. Like my dad is only in his 50s, and he remembers being a child during the Bangladeshi liberation movement, and remembers like villages being burned and like people getting killed and all this stuff. So it's definitely like not so very far removed for us.
Mhm. let's move on to the next question. So it's
Yeah.
like a little less just depressing. What are Bangladeshi kids' favorite snacks and games?
Okay, we got a lot of great snacks, right?
Yeah, we do.
A lot of great snacks. What is that company? Is it like the prawn company or something like that? That they make a lot of different chips and things,
Mm-hmm.
crisps.
They have like the prawn crackers, and then they have like the prawn like mango bars, which are also really good. Um,
Their mango juice is good as well.
yeah, their mango juice is really good. Um, there's
The
also like,
Mr. Twist. Is
yeah,
that one?
Mr. Twist is like my favorite. I love Mr. Twist. Whenever I go to Bangladesh, I love having Mr. Twist. I'm like
Sana.
a child. Sorry?
I said sana is also really good. Sana sur.
Yeah, especially like with Ramadan as well. That's a very popular food to eat for Ramadan. Um, and then in our food tier video, we also talked about janachur, which is a very popular snack. Um, we have that a lot. I love janachur. Muri as well, which is like puffed rice. And then the food that we talked about in the food tier ranking video was chalmuri, which is like um, muri and janachur mixed together with like chili and like oil and stuff, and that's quite nice as well. Um, what else do we have? We have like a lot of like Indian snacks, like kurkuri and stuff, and that's really nice, very spicy. Um, we have the achar,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know what they're called, but they're like this very cheap, like what do you? There's a word for like. It's like this very cheap, like I don't know what to call it in English, but it's like a little snack. It's very spicy. And when I was in Bangladesh, you could get them like just in like the corner shops. And yeah, I used to love having them.
Yeah, yeah, I like those as well. I haven't had them in like a while, but
Yeah, you
uh
can't really find them in Taka anymore, but you can still get them in some places in Sylhet.
yeah. There's a lot of good food. I would say like one thing I have heard positive from a lot of other South Asian countries is they're like, oh, Bengalis tend to be like the best cooks and stuff. Although maybe that ties to the whole labor thing, like they're using us as labor. But I think like the first restaurant that was opened in the UK or in England, I should say, the Hindustan Cafe was actually opened by a Bengali chef. And then you have a lot of like famous staple dishes like tikka masala that they speculate was made by a Bengali chef. So, that is a part of our history. We have like really good food. And that's why we had that whole video about food. But
Yeah.
so
Food is basically like, if you think about Bangladeshi culture, is just food. That's it.
food is life. Yeah. Like when
Yeah.
people talk about the evil eye in other cultures, like of course you can have the evil eye for other things, but like they'll specifically Bengalis will specifically be like, oh, ditya about food, like because if you're eating something really delicious, somebody might like give you the evil eye because they're like, oh, I want to eat that delicious thing, and then you end up with a stomach ache. So that's how passionate we are about food. Like, we accidentally put little, give each other the eye based on like, oh, that person is eating chanachur and I want chanachur. So
I think
yeah,
that's valid.
it is valid. I think that's like the most valid reason to give someone the eye, right?
In terms of games, we have carom board. So carom board, I don't know if it exists outside of South Asia, but it's like, how do I describe carom board?
You
It's like
draw it on like the ground, right? A big,
no, I mean,
no.
do you? I had like a proper board because it's like a board and it has like the four corners. So I guess it's like a little bit like pool, but you don't have like balls or what do you call the stick for the pool?
Uh, pool stick. I don't know.
I don't know. Well, we don't have the stick or the
Cue.
balls. What we
That's what it's
have is
called. Cue.
cue. Yeah, we don't have the cue or the balls. We have like little small discs. And basically you use like you have one specific disc and you use it to like put the do you call them carom? I actually don't know what they're called even in Bangla, but you put them into like the corners I'm pretty sure that's how you play carom board. I haven't played it in a long time, but we used to have like a carom board in the school that I went to in Bangladesh. Um, I think I liked playing it, but I don't think I was any good at it.
My favorite game that I played in Bangladesh and that you can still find in some like Bengali grocers that we have nearby is like Ludo. I had so much fun playing Ludo with my cousins as a kid, and it's
I literally
similar
have
in
Ludo like in my room.
Ludo is fun. Like, you know, it's like our version of like Monopoly or whatever, and people get really passionate about Ludo. So it's a board game, and you have like also four different colors, right? Four
Mhm.
different colors and corners, and the whole point of the game is to like get your color all the way around back into like its home base
Mhm.
for as many of your pieces. I think you get four pieces. I can't remember. It's
Yeah,
been a
you
little
got four
since I
pieces.
played. Yeah, so the whole goal is to like get your four pieces back. And I think if you jump over somebody else's piece, then they have to go back home or something and start
Not
over.
if
I
they
can't
jump
remember.
over somebody's piece. Although, to be honest, I feel
I don't
like
remember.
different people have different rules. So, yeah, people make up different rules about different things sometimes.
I don't actually remember because it has been a while. The last time I played was actually when I went to Bangladesh in like 2016 or something. So it's been a little while and I don't specifically remember the rules. But something I noticed about every single Ludo board that I've ever bought is that on the back is snakes and ladders. So I just
Yeah.
think that's really funny. And I think that's another game that I think that one though people know of. Maybe it started in South Asia. I don't know, but because we do have a lot of snakes there. But I think Westerners do know about snakes and ladders because that is a game that exists here as well. So for snakes and ladders, you know, you either go up the ladder, you get eaten by a snake, and go down through the snake's belly. So that's another one.
Um, what are the biggest holidays in addition to Independence Day, our holiday celebrated? Well, this question was because we asked for Independence Day. So I guess we can say what are the biggest holidays in addition to New Year's?
Okay, so we talked about Independence Day in our previous video, and we talked about Eid, which we celebrate because Bangladesh tends to be a majority Muslim nation. And then I don't think we actually talked about New Year's much. So, you know, when we have the Boishak, we have the Boishaki Mela, which is like this big festival, and it's not as big here or in the diaspora. But like if you go to Bangladesh, they make like a whole big thing out of it. And you have like people and they're dancing and there's mass and there's floats with flowers and they take it really seriously there. So if you ever like have a chance to go to Bangladesh during the New Year's might be a really fun time to do it because there would be like lots of snacks and food stands and very colorful. Like our people are just super colorful. So
Yeah, the people do a big celebration for Boishak in Bangladesh, probably in West Bengal as well, because so our New Year is based on the Bengali calendar. We have a specific calendar for like a Bengali calendar, and our New Year is April 14th when this video is going to be uploaded, and yeah, I think even in the diaspora, like here, we do celebrate it sometimes, but usually we just do like a dawat, which is like a party, and people will like dress up in like Bangladeshi colors. They'll wear like green or red, and we'll sometimes eat like traditional like Bangla food, not like sometimes proper traditional food, not just like biryani and pulao, like proper traditional food, you know. Um, so yeah, sometimes we do celebrate like Boishak here. What other holidays do we have?
we have International Mother Language Day, which has some
Yeah,
ceremony associated with it. So that passed not that long ago, right? Was it
February 20,
yeah,
21st.
20, yeah. So for International Mother Language Day, that is to commemorate the martyrs who Adiba mentioned earlier, the language movement martyrs, who they were students of the Dhaka University, and they basically, when Pakistan declared that, you know, Bangladesh could not be our official language, that we shouldn't, you know, speak it out in public, the students of the Dhaka University protested that, and they were killed by the Pakistani. I don't know if they were police or military, but they were killed, and so to commemorate that, we have this monument called the Shohid Minar, and even in like parts of the US where you have a large Bangladeshi population, sometimes they'll build the Shohid Minar monument in honor of that population. And
in London as well, we have a Shohid Minar monument. Well, I say we like I'm from London, I'm not. But in London, I've been there and there is a Shohid Minar monument.
Yeah, so in like different parts of the world, if you have like a big Bangladeshi diaspora population, so they'll build the Shohid Minar, and people will go and they'll leave flowers in honor of the martyrs who died on that particular day. So yeah, my debut is set in my hometown, and it is like a very Bangladeshi town, huge Bangladeshi diaspora population, and we have a Shohid Minar monument. I'm not sure if I mentioned it in the book because it's the sort of thing like the flowers, are placed in February, and my book takes place in summer, so not so much, but it does have a Shohid Minar monument because we have such a high Bangladeshi population.
Then we also have a Victory Day, which is December 16th, I think. I'm not exactly sure. I always forget the date of Victory Day. So yeah, and then we spoke about our Independence Day, which is March. No, not March. Is it March? Yes, it is March.
It was March, right?
26? Is that it?
Yeah.
When did we upload? I can't even remember when we uploaded our video for this.
Yeah.
Listen, guys, it's a lot of dates to remember, right? We have a lot of holidays.
We do. Yeah. I basically never remember the date. I'll just remember the month. That one takes place in this month. This one takes place in that month, like that.
We also have, I guess, like some Hindu holidays as well, because probably our second biggest religion in Bangladesh is Hinduism. So, like Diwali, Durga Puja, Holi, these are also like big holidays. Are there any other Hindu festivals? I mean, actually, there are a lot of Hindu festivals, to be honest.
Yeah, they have a lot of pujas. So.
Yeah, I don't know all of them, but I think these are like the three like super big ones. Celebratory foods. Is there anything in particular Bangladeshis eat for special occasions or festivals, etc.?
I think we talked about this a little bit during our food video as well, but and I think South Asians in general do this, but to celebrate, we have something sweet after. So like Bangladeshis, we call our desserts mishti, and it's very common to like, buy mishti to celebrate, when you've had something big happen to you, or for other people to come with mishti to show that they're like proud of you or whatever else. And yeah, I think other South Asians do that too, though.
Mara asked, favorite Bangladeshi myths and legends?
A lot of them.
Yeah, your time to shine, Pri.
Yeah. Adiba says that because if you follow me on Twitter, my username is actually Booth Babe. So Booth means ghost in a lot of South Asian languages, actually, and not just Bengali. And we are just a very superstitious people. A lot of our folklore, if you like look specifically into Bengali folklore, and that includes West Bengal, ties back to like spirits. So I think we explain away a lot of the stuff that happens to us that cannot be explained using Booth, and also using, because of our Islamic background, the zine, which the people know as jinn. So like whenever you have something, like, oh, someone's acting strange or whatever, it's like bute dorse or zine dorse, and it's basically that the idea is just that they're possessed by a ghost or a jinn. So that's something. And then we just have like a lot of ghosts. So like I could probably go through like a whole bunch of different ghosts, but we have basically a kind of ghost for everything. We talked about tigers before. There's a kind of ghost that's literally like the victims of a Bengal tiger. And then there's a ghost called Anishi, which is like, it comes out at, obviously most of them come out at night, but it'll like call your name in the voice of a loved one. And you have to like not respond 3 times because if you respond, it will like, take possession of you or whatever else. So there's that. And just a whole bunch of different ghosts. Some of them are Hindu ghosts. Some of them are not necessarily associated with Hinduism. But I think one of the things that makes Bangladesh so interesting is that it does have like a more uniquely, like it's more connected to its Hindu roots than like, for example, Pakistan, which is like more strictly Muslim.
I think this is like one of the reasons why we also get like discriminated against, even by like Muslim people, because I know that I will say to my friends, like my Muslim friends who are not from Bangladesh, and I will say like, oh, I like that something about how we practice Islam, and they're like, no, that's not right. And a lot of the time it's because we actually have adapted our culture, which comes from Hinduism, into our religion, which comes from Islam, so we've kind of merged the two things together. So for example, something that I think is dying down a little bit now is the fact that when I go to Bangladesh and when I meet somebody who is like more elderly, I'm expected to give like, like usually you would say assalamu alaikum to, greet whoever. But when you meet somebody who is elderly, you're expected to like touch their feet. So touching the feet is something that is very Hindu. It's like in Hindi, it's called like taking ashirvad. I don't know what that means in English, but it's just like a sign of respect that you do for people who are like elderly or older than you. So in Bangladesh, people actually still do this, but it is dying out a bit. So I remember once I went to visit my great aunt in Sylhet, and I think my brother, he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to say salam by touching her feet, and she got super offended, and she wouldn't like talk to him and stuff. So it is a big thing, but you're really not supposed to do this in like Islam. But we've literally adapted this idea of ashirvad from Hinduism and like brought it into saying salam in Islam.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of different examples of this, and I agree with Adiba. I think this is partially why we've faced discrimination from particularly Pakistan, because they, believe they have like a more pure form of Islam. But even with like the idea of like the booth, Islam doesn't really believe in ghosts. And then you have like our whole subculture, and it's like basically we've married the concept of the zine with booth, whereas in Islam they don't really even believe in ghosts and hauntings in that particular way. They tend to blame all supernatural occurrences on just the jinn. So,
and then in terms of folklore, we have a lot of folklore. We have a lot of folk tales. We have our famous like, I guess, stories is like this collection called Takumar Juli, which translates to like grandmother's bag. And it's just like stories. The idea is like it's a grandmother telling stories to kids, and they're all like about bhoot and different kind of creatures, about like Rakush, Kokush, who are like types of demons, about like the Royal Bengal tiger. The Royal Bengal tiger shows up like everywhere in our stories, and the jungle snakes. These are all very like common things that show up in our stories. We have like a lot of different kinds of folklores, a lot of different like folk stories.
And then of course, like there's books you can read, not necessarily about Bangladesh, but Sayantani Dasgupta's, she has a whole series, a middle grade series. It's like wonderful. So you can read that to find out about some specifically Bengali creatures that come up in our folklore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you're interested in Bengali myths and folklores, Sayantani's book is perfect, because I really think her books are so like Bengali. Even like just the fact that there's parts where like Mala has to like pass something and she has to like answer riddles and stuff. Riddles are very, very Bengali, like riddles, rhyming things. These are all very Bengali. You might be thinking like, oh, everybody does this. Not like Bengalis. Not like Bengalis.
And they're hilarious, so you'll enjoy them regardless.
Yeah. So I mean, Sayantani's books are amazing, so I highly recommend checking them out. There's like a series. The series is completed, the trilogy, but then she has another like spin-off coming out about a Rakushi queen, and she's been pitching it as like about like colonialism and stuff. So I'm really, and like about revolution and stuff. So I'm really excited to read about that.
Yeah, and something fun, just because Adiba brought up the raikosh, is like in Bengalis, if like you have somebody who eats a lot, you often insult them by being like, "Oh, raikosh, raikosh."
Yeah, there's like a really, really common phrase that Bengalis say. They'll be like, "Rakoshar moton khacho keno?" Why are you
Yeah,
eating like a rakosh?
and a raikosh is like this like demon, and it's like very cannibalistic and like eat anything that it comes across. So if you call someone
Yeah.
raikosh because of their eating habits, you're
Literally a rakosh, like the rakosh's like phrase is like when a rakosh sees a human, it will say like how mao cow cow monasher gondopao, which literally means like gibberish, how mao cow cow, I can smell humans. So this is like what they always say.
And they usually finish with hami manush khai, which is I eat humans. So yeah. So if you call someone that, like if you really want to, if somebody steals your last French fry and you were hoping to eat that, maybe you can call them like kosh. I don't know.
Yeah, it works. Some very Bangladeshi things to do, say, or believe in, or BuzzFeed style things only Bangladeshis would relate to.
Well, like you just said, riddles, rhyming, those are very Bangladeshi. We have some very creative insults. So like raikosh is an insult right there for like people who, and we just have some there that are not safe for work, even though people you work with probably will not understand them, but our people can like get very creative with insults, and it usually has to, like, it'll call in like the last, I don't know, whatever generations of your family, and like insult everyone in your family rather than just insulting you. So I think that's pretty Bengali. Our language and our pride in our language, just because we've had so much stuff happen to us, is pretty Bengali.
Yeah, like I think all Bengali parents will say to their kids, like, your people died for your language, so you better learn like how to speak it. So this is like a big thing. My parents always say this to me.
Yeah, and I feel like when we go back to like comparing us to other South Asian diaspora, I think I want to say maybe Bengalis are more likely to know how to speak our language because of the persecution we faced. Because, as you said, our parents would be like, no, you have to learn the language because, your ancestors died so that you could learn, so you could speak the language. So you have to speak the language. And I tend to encounter other South Asian diaspora and people who don't know the language at all. Whereas like most of the Bengalis I speak to know how to speak the language.
Another thing, I think all South Asians do this, but Bangladeshis do it in a specific way, is like the doubling of our words and like the rhyming them. Like we'll say like, I don't even know, like like in my book, I mentioned this. I think the parents says something like Instagram to Instagram. And this is just something that all South Asian people do that, but they each do it in a slightly different way. They have a different like sound that they use when they're doing the doubling. So Bangladeshis have a specific one. I'm not sure if it's a T, if it's like that, Instagram to Instagram, but I remember when I was writing the book, I was thinking really hard about it. I changed it a couple of times because I was trying to be like, if my mom was talking about Instagram, how would she double it? So I don't know if I got it right, because it is difficult to think of it like on the spot, but yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, but like you said, it's like hard to just think about it. It comes naturally sometimes, as particularly for our parents. Like we just have a lot of like, and I think we have a lot of like nonsense sounds too. So then when you like go to like how mau cow, but that's not the only one. We have like a lot of like nonsense sounds in our language to react to things. I think like the way that
like
we'll talk
our
to
parents going like ish.
Yeah. So just things that don't necessarily mean anything, but like they're a way to react. Like, oh, I guess for Westerners, that's something you can understand. Oh, doesn't really mean anything, but it expresses a particular feeling. And we have a lot of those sorts of things.
Funniest family gathering story.
Okay. I think I've mentioned this one before to you at least. But when I went to England, I went to Birmingham, and Birmingham is like filled with Pakistanis and Bangladeshis in particular. And so it's kind of like its own little like microcosm of South Asia. And uh, what I've noticed about the United Kingdom is that like people, Bangladeshis there tend to be more religious, and just South Asians in general tend to like show their religion more and like be more superstitious. And so like when I went to my aunt's house in Birmingham, this was for a wedding, and she had like this whole big room just closed off on the side, and she wouldn't let us stay in there. So we had to like squeeze together to sleep in, with cousins and whatever. And we kept like asking her, like, why can't we just stay here? Like, even if we just, rolled out some sheets and stayed here, it's pretty big. And she would say no. And then later we found out that the reason for that is because that they believe that there's a jinn there, like a good jinn, and it brings them luck. So she didn't want us to stay there because she didn't want us to disrupt the jinn. But then when the wedding started, like it got so busy that she did tell all of us kids to go and sit in there. And my cousins from London came, and like one of them sat down, and her son just came in and was like, that's the spot where the jinn likes to sit in. And he got so scared and he couldn't sleep for like the rest of the night because he was worried that the jinn would take revenge. Because I just got to say, like, white people who write about jinn, I pray for you. I really do, because you don't know what the heck you're doing. They can be very vengeful. He was fine, but he did like, there's ways to react and pray if you do encounter a jinn. And, we know it and you don't, is all I got to say. So I hope the money that you make appropriating us is worth it, because who knows, right?
Yeah, honestly, I would never write a jinn story. I pray for those of you who do write your jinn stories. And I also pray for myself. But yeah, I would not go there. I think I would be too scared. So this happened when I went to visit Bangladesh for my aunt's wedding. All of our stories happen around weddings, because weddings and food are two things. So for my aunt's wedding, basically when you have a wedding, you have something called a biyabari, and that's like, it literally translates to a wedding house. So this is where it's like just a house where people gather to prepare for the wedding. So usually probably like a week or more before the wedding, and even after the wedding, this is where people will come to eat, they'll come to celebrate, they'll come to like help prepare anything that needs to be prepared. And this is where people from the other party of the wedding might come to like deliver things as well. So this is like a very central spot for the wedding. So this was after my aunt had already gotten married, but we were going to go to like the Bobhat, which is like the reception. So we were in Chittagong, but the reception was in Dhaka, and we are going to go to Dhaka the next day. And basically my uncle's camera was missing. And he was like, why is my camera missing? Has anybody seen it? And we were looking all over everywhere, but nobody could find the camera. So then one of my cousins was like, I know what happened to your camera. A jinn took it. And we were like, we don't think so. But he was very insisting, yeah, it was a jinn. And I guess we thought that because like we're all family, so it would really not make sense for us to like steal each other's cameras. So he was like, yeah, it was a jinn. We didn't, nobody really believed him, but he was insisting so much that the day before we were supposed to leave or the night before we were supposed to leave for Dhaka, he gathered a bunch of men and brought them to a room to call the jinn into the house, and to like get the camera. So this was like a very intense night. They were all like in this tiny room with the door closed, and we weren't allowed to go inside. So we're all like waiting outside, like waiting for this jinn to come. And then at one point there was like a sound like a gunshot, and we were all like gasping and like screaming, like scared. We're like, what is the jinn doing? It wasn't a jinn, and I don't even think it was a gunshot. I think it was like a car backfiring or something. It could have been a gunshot though, because people have guns in Bangladesh. I'm not sure. And then like towards the end of the night, like super late at night, my cousin and all the other people like came outside, and obviously there was no jinn, there was no camera, and my cousin got really annoyed and he was like, the reason why the jinn didn't come is because you guys didn't believe. And so he didn't come. And we were like, okay, like that doesn't really make any sense, but okay. So, there was no jinn, no camera. And then the next day we all got on the train to go to Dhaka and we're all super tired. Then we got off the train and like one of our other family members, I can't remember who, they like came up to my uncle and they're like, oh, I accidentally brought your camera with me to Dhaka. So yeah, there was no jinn.
Guess sometimes jinn are like Tinkerbell. You have to believe. Clap if you believe.
According to my cousin.
That just goes to show the fact that we both have like a jinn story is that like our people are just super superstitious. So
our next question is, who are some famous Bengali people we should be aware of? Besides you, obviously, this person said, living or dead. I don't think I qualify as a famous Bangladeshi person.
Famous to me. I actually have Adiba's book here, but I'm not going to pull it out of my pile because yeah.
Well, also like right behind me, you can see like my stack of books,
which makes a beautiful background. So there's that. Now I can't remember what was the question. Oh,
famous Bengali people living or dead.
Yeah. A lot of different authors. It's really hard to like distinguish between Bengali and Bangladeshi sometimes. So you have like Rabindranath Tagore, who's like really famous, and like when I go to like Barnes and Nobles, they'll have a picture of him with other famous authors. So like he's really well known even out west. Jhumpa Lahiri, who's also Bengali and not Bangladeshi, and you just have a lot of I think it's more common because of how new Bangladesh is. It's only 50 years old to have Bengali rather than Bangladeshi people who are well known. I want to say
there are a lot of like famous Bengali authors, like authors from West Bengal. So like Jhumpa Lahiri, Amitav Ghosh, honestly like a bunch of different authors who do write in English. Probably Jhumpa Lahiri is the most famous because people do like just recognize her. And then there are like famous Bengali people who write in Bangla, but probably like Westerners won't know, but they would be famous in Bangladesh. Like I think Humayun Ahmed is a very famous person and he writes in Bangla and he also writes like Bengali TV and stuff. And I think he has a very like, I don't know, because I remember going to like Bengali dawats and people like gossiping about Humayun Ahmed's life and who he's marrying and who he's cheating on and stuff. So I guess that's like a point of conversation for people. They're famous Bangladeshi people. I think the most famous person that people probably recognize is Nadia Hussain, who is the winner of the Great British Bake Off. And I think she's probably one of the most famous winners. Because she does have like a big presence. She has like a bunch of. Sorry?
You said I think she's the favorite of like all the seasons. People love her, which is great because she is amazing. She's great.
And she's also from Sylhet. So, probably somehow related to us. We need to get on that somehow.
I don't know if you guys have Khan Academy and do you guys ever use Khan Academy in schools?
Mm-hmm.
I believe the founder of Khan Academy is also Bangladeshi.
Yeah.
He's from New York, not too far away. So there's that. And then I think someone involved in the creation of YouTube may have been as well. I don't remember, but I guess we have like random like tech people involved who've like made strides in technology.
Mm-hmm. Our Nobel laureate, whose name again I've forgotten, Muhammad Yunus.
Yeah.
He is like the founder of Grameen Bank, I think. So he won the Nobel Prize in economics. So he is quite famous. So I guess probably people outside of economics probably don't know him. There's also a Bangladeshi Irish singer that I know called Joy Crooks. So she is quite famous. I follow her on Instagram. Is there anybody else?
I think like we kind of like slip through the cracks sometimes, and we don't like. Sometimes we'll find out someone's Bangladeshi, and we'll be like, "Wow, that person's Bangladeshi." So like, I think that happens a lot. I think Google had a doodle a few years ago celebrating like the life of some famous architect in the U.S. and he was Bangladeshi or something like that. So yeah, I think we like kind of slip under the covers a lot. It's not always obvious, or like it's not as celebrated, and hopefully that changes. Part of it, I do think, has to do with like our very young nation. But as we get to be older and have like, I think we already have a rich history, but have other people recognize us, because we've talked about this before. But like people will be like, "What the heck is Bangladesh? Like, that's a country. What's going? Or are you Indian? Are you Pakistani? Are you sure Bangladesh is real? Did you just imagine it?" So yeah, as it starts to like become part of people's social consciousness, hopefully that will change.
Yeah, I think something that is sad is that, like I said, Nadia Hussain is probably the most famous Bangladeshi right now, but I think people don't really recognize her as a Bangladeshi person, which is really sad, especially because like I'm like because she lives in the UK. Where is she from in the UK? I'm not sure. I know that one of my cousins from Manchester, one of their friends said that she was their sassy. So I was like, does that mean that she is also from Manchester? I don't know. Um, but I'm not sure where she's from, but obviously in the UK, in a lot of areas, there's like a big like Bangladeshi community, not just a South Asian community, specifically a Bangladeshi community. I know when I go to Manchester, like there's definitely a big Bangladeshi community there. In London, there's a big Bangladeshi community. In Birmingham, there's a big Bangladeshi community, and probably in also other different parts of the UK. So probably like Nadia Hussain is from like a very specific Bangladeshi community, and that's probably actually like a very big part of her life. So it's kind of sad that people aren't necessarily recognizing that. So yeah.
And there was another one, I think his name is Rahul, who is Bengali, not Bangladeshi. So when I mentioned earlier that we're like really good at food, just the fact that we have two Bengali, maybe not necessarily Bangladeshi, winners of this big competition probably says to that. And like that's one of the places where I felt like most represented, because I remember I was watching like MasterChef Junior, and one of the cooks that made it like toward the end, I don't think he won, but I think it was like third or something like that. He was Bangladeshi as well. So I was like, oh wow, like we just show up a lot randomly. And then there's Sola, who now I can't remember, but from those you remember they had that like big conspiracy where they were like not paying their people of color as much.
Yeah. I can't remember what it is. But I remember.
It's either Bangladeshi or Bengali. So like we just pop up a lot, I think, within cooking communities. And I guess that is because it's like a big part of our, I don't know, history or something like that.
And I think like we should clarify, because we're talking a lot about Bengali people and Bangladeshi people. There's obviously like a lot of overlap. Basically, like the Bengals is one region, and when India became independent, Pakistan was partitioned from India, and then the Bengals became divided. So East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh, was divided from that part, the west, from West Bengal. We were the East. So because of that, there is overlapping history, and people can be from Bangladesh and have family who are from West Bengal, and people can be from West Bengal and have family who are from Bangladesh. And there's obviously like migration and stuff between those places as well. So you can be like from Bangladesh and have a lot of ties, like very immediate ties to West Bengal and vice versa. So we're very connected.
Yeah, it tends to be connected by the language, because West Bengal is considered part of India, but they speak Bengali like us. And so that's part of the connected history of West Bengal and Bangladesh. Um, Something else I was going to add. So we refer to ourselves as Bengali a lot, and that's just because of the shared language. So I would say a lot of people in Bangladesh can probably refer to themselves as Bengali because they speak the language, but people in West Bengal won't always refer to themselves as Bangladeshi unless, as Adiba said, they have like some kind of family or connection there, because they don't necessarily have to be from Bangladesh to still be Bengali.
Mhm. So our next question is, could you describe Bangladesh's geography? I know where it is, but not much about the actual landscape. Is it mainly flat, or are there mountains, forest, or farmland, or has it changed in the last century or so?
We have a very rich landscape, I think, like a very interesting landscape in Bangladesh. Like that's what the green is all about. That it's such a green place. I would venture to say we have a little bit of everything there. So we've got the Chundarbans, which we talked about before, the world's largest mangrove forest. We've got a lot of like specific fauna and flora that are just indigenous to just Bangladesh. We have Cox's Bazar, which we talked about briefly earlier, which is like the longest natural stretch of beach. And I guess there are man-made stretches of beach that are bigger.
And Cox's Bazar is really long. Like it's really long.
Yeah. So a lot of interesting things in Bangladesh, I think. Oh, and the tea gardens as well. Bangladesh has, forget exactly how much, I think it was like 60% of the world's tea gardens, or maybe even more than that, are in Bangladesh.
Yeah. This is why people need to stop associating tea with colonizer British people. Yeah. Tea is our thing.
They stole it from us, just like they stole everything from us. I think they said their national dish is chicken tikka masala now, which is something else they stole from us. So yeah. My book is about tea, and I talk about colonizers a lot and just make fun of them. So,
but no, like seriously, when the British first came to India, the first place they actually went to were the Bengals. I think they specifically started through colonizing Sylhet and Chittagong because those are the most hilly areas, and that's where all the tea gardens are. So the British first came to Bangladesh, and they were like, "We want your tea." And then they spread their colonization to the rest of South Asia. Very rude people. So yeah, we have a lot of hills because of our tea gardens, obviously. That's mostly in Chittagong and Sylhet. And we also have a lot of rivers. Like I don't even know how many rivers we have, but there are a lot of rivers. And obviously we're by the sea as well because we have Cox's Bazar. So yeah, we really do have like a bit of everything.
Yeah. White people who drink tea quirkily, we are not the same. When we talk about tea, we're not like you. Don't associate us with your bland tea.
It's just wild to me that British people say it's like English breakfast tea, and it's like that is colonizer tea.
Yeah. So anyway, if you really want tea, go to South Asian tea shops and stuff like that, which is actually, my book is set in a tea shop in the US, but yeah, I talk about colonizers a lot there. So we are not the same.
Okay, more questions about food, but I think we've answered that. Would love to know more about how the Bangladeshi diaspora experience differs from other desi diaspora experiences and what your favorite parts of Bangladeshi culture are. We already kind of touched on this. So yeah, basically like to repeat, I guess, what we already said, we do have a very different diaspora experience from a lot of other desi diaspora people, just because we're so young as a country, because our history means that we have been oppressed by other people from the South Asian community. So we are quite discriminated against in general, but also by other South Asian people. And we do tend to be more working class because of our history. Anything else that makes us different in our diaspora experience?
Uh, I would say that's just about it, but like I do ask people to like think about how that class struggle might then play out throughout like our narratives and stuff like that because uh sometimes when I read about like the other South Asian diaspora, it doesn't feel like, of course, I see myself in it more than I see myself in some other stories, but it doesn't always feel authentic to my personal experience being a Bangladeshi in the diaspora because, because of the lack of the the wealth that seems to like play a big part in a lot of other South Asian diaspora. We just don't have a lot of the same experiences, I think. So like just talking about like what our parents aspire for us. A lot of the times Bangladeshi parents will just aspire that you go to college and you do something and you have a career that you're able to like thrive in. So whenever I read about like, oh, you have to be a doctor, or you have to be this, or you have to be that, it doesn't always feel authentic to me because my parents just wanted me to have a career and I do. So they're satisfied enough. They never try to like force me to like medical field or anything. They may have implied, like because there's this idea like, oh, you're going to be successful if you do that. But I think part of that also comes back to class because medical school is really freaking expensive, especially in the US. So when you have working class parents, they tend to be thinking about like, how can I afford to not just put you through 4 years of college, but then 4 years of medical school or 4 years of law school. So that's one way that I would say is different. Uh, and I guess sometimes because of the media that is common, it becomes easy for even like Bangladeshi writers to like fall into these very common tropes, but they're not always authentic to us. I mean, of course, we're not a monolith, so there's no way to say 100% for everyone. But for me, if you write a story about like Bangladeshis and you don't touch upon the working class at all, that feels so unrealistic to me because I would say the majority of people that I know are working class. And then, of course, you have people who are not.
I think like it feels inauthentic to also have a lot of stories where it's like just well, obviously it depends on where they are. Like in the henna wars, for example, Nishat is not necessarily super inundated with other Bengali people, but that's probably because Ireland is super white. But I think for the most part, you will see that Bengali people really gravitate towards their community. And I think that's important to like explore in narratives as well. So like actually in both of my books, there are like instances where these characters and their families are like going to Bengali parties, what we call dawats, and they're like somehow like integrated within the Bangladeshi community, because I think like this is something very important to Bengali specifically, like we said, because of like our history, because we do have like this specific language that kind of sets us apart, and this kind of specific oppression that also sets us apart from like maybe Indians and Pakistanis. So we do kind of gravitate towards each other.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Like my whole book is about community. And I don't know if I will always write about that, but it was just very important to me with my debut to like touch upon that. So I am like super proud of the fact that I was able to add in like different kinds of Bangladeshis because I think it's so important too when you're representing to be able to show more than one shit. We talk all the time about how we're not a monolith, but how do you show that in your writing? And I think it's so important to be able to show like different people within the community and how different they can be so that it doesn't just feel like one experience of one person is universal.
Yeah, this is really what I was trying to do with like Honey and Issue, because like I just want to write like two Bengali people who are literally from two different countries and have complete different personalities, just to show like Bengali people can be so different and they can still be super Bengali.
Yeah. And I love that. I was like so excited when I was like, oh, a Bangladeshi and a Bengali. And I feel like that's something that if you're not Bengali yourself, you wouldn't like see immediately like, oh, how interesting is that? But because I am, I was like, okay, this is gonna be really interesting that you have like a Bangladeshi Muslim and a Bengali Hindu.
Well, I think she was like, issue is like her family is Hindu, but she doesn't, she's not really close to her religion, I
Yeah.
guess. So she wouldn't, I think she says in the book, like she doesn't really like believe in God and stuff. Whereas Honey is very connected to her faith. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
like I guess Hindu descended or like
Yeah.
I don't know how to say it exactly
Hopefully,
because
I don't know, because I'm sure she maybe celebrates. I don't know.
yeah, she definitely would celebrate like Hindu things, but I don't know if I didn't want to make that assumption that a Hindu
Yeah.
person would identify as like culturally Hindu, because I know that there's discussion about like it amongst like Muslims and stuff.
Yeah.
I mostly disagree with a lot of it, but anyway. So I don't want to like make any assumptions because obviously I am not Hindu, but I would say, you know, she definitely celebrates Hindu culture, but she doesn't necessarily identify as a Hindu.
Yeah. But either way, just like when I saw Bangladeshi slash Bengali, I was like, okay, this is going to be very interesting for me as a reader. Um, Maybe not to like everybody else who's not within our specific cultural, background, but like because we can at least immediately recognize some of the differences and the similarities.
Mm-hmm.
And I can definitely see like all the white people in the school being like, oh, but you're both Bengali, aren't you? So like, of course you have to be best friends.
Um, our next question is, well, more questions about food. I'd love to hear about your cultural Eid specialties.
What specialties?
Eid specialties. So, like, what food do we
Oh,
eat during Eid?
okay. I think we talked about this a little bit, I think, during the tier ranking video. But for my family, like we have a lot of mishti. So we'll have like rosh malai, we'll have khalajam, and just like different kinds of mishti in general. And then I tend to like a lot of savory dishes during Eid. So halim, chotfoti, samosas, rolls, all that. Like I will just pig out during Eid, which is ironic because we don't eat pig, but so yeah.
Yes. um, yeah, there's a lot of food during Eid. We also have like basically all of those things. Um, it depends on if it's Rujar Eid or Qurbanir Eid. Actually here we basically have the same food for both of those. But you know, we'll have like pulao, kurma and stuff, or biryani. Chatpoti we'll have. And then usually for breakfast we'll have like porota with like either chicken, like chicken kurma, or like meat curry. Um, but in Bangladesh, when we are there for Qurbanir Eid, after we have like sacrificed the cow or goat or whatever, and we divide up the meat, we usually like cook it, and then we all like have the Qurbanir mangsho, because that's like actually the big thing for Qurbanir Eid, having the mangsho. So we have the mangsho is the meat. We have the Qurbanir mangsho, usually like all together, like we cook it on the day and we have it. We can't really do that here because the meat comes much later. But in Bangladesh, and when I lived in Saudi as well, actually, we would get the meat like immediately, so we could cook it and eat it.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. The one time that I went and spent Qurbani Eid in Bangladesh, but yeah, I would say like the rest of the time it does tend to be the same kinds of foods,
Mm-hmm.
but they're great. So you can have them like both Eids and not get tired of them because they tend to be months apart anyway. So
What's one aspect of Bangladeshi culture you wish more people knew about?
we just said I do wish that people would not just like conflate us with the rest of South Asians and make assumptions about like the way that we should be represented because we're not, because of our history and so on. There's just a lot that's not similar at all, and I would like to see more of us get published and more representation of that. So that's slowly but surely happening. And I hope it keeps happening, especially because like we're such a young, small country. The fact that we are even like next year is when my debut comes out, and then you have uh, Is Donut Book releasing then? Is that no? Is Donut
No,
Book
next year is my Titanic book, which does not have a Bangladeshi character,
okay? So,
unfortunately.
okay. I
Um,
mean, no, maybe like Sabina Khan is releasing a book then. I don't know, maybe. Um, Tashi Bhuyan, maybe she's releasing, I think she is releasing a book then. But yeah, even the fact like this year too, it like blows my mind that 3 Bangladeshi authors are getting published at the same time. So slowly but surely it is increasing. And I hope that it keeps increasing because I would like to see more representation and, you know, who the gatekeepers allow in, for that to be expanded so that we can see different facets of our experience showcased.
mhm, yeah. And I hope that, what do I hope? I hope that we actually see us in different genres, because I'm now realizing that all of us are writing YA contemporary, which is awesome because I love YA contemporary, but it would be great for you to get to publish, your fantasies, for me to publish my fantasy. So yeah, and even other genres. I would love to see Bangladeshi show up in all of these different kinds of books, because I think with contemporaries, a lot of the time it just becomes kind of like issue books. Obviously, my book is not an issue book; it is a rom-com. But I think the Henna Wars kind of became an issue book, if that makes sense, because people would always be like, "This book is so important," which obviously it is, but there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, I think the problem is like that's become like such coded language, and they'll say that about any book by a person of color. This book is so important. And okay, I suppose that's true, but at the same time, I would like to get to the point where we're no longer important and we're just like part of the stream of books being published, and we can be more than just, writing about our issues.
Mhm.
So yeah, in my particular book, I do talk about like classism a lot, and my protagonist is like dealing with. It happened a few years ago, but she's dealing with grief from losing a parent.
Mhm.
So I will say, like, I was really glad. That's actually one of the things that drew me to writing genre, because I wanted to be able to write without having to unpack, bigotry, Islamophobia, whatever. And I think that a lot of past books have leaned toward, and even some like even in books that you wouldn't expect it to, it just bleeds in. So, and I think that part of that is that you can't really, separate the things that we experience and that our characters would experience. But at the same time, I would like to get to the point where we have like joyful books. And your book was a great part of that. Still important, but maybe not in the way that the people who are calling it important now are acknowledging it as.
Mhm. Well, to go back to the question, I think I would just like people, like you said, I would just like people to acknowledge that Bangladesh exists, and to not like, because I think one of the biggest things, I don't want to call it an obstacle because it's not necessarily an obstacle, but I guess one of the biggest microaggressions that I've faced in publishing from readers, and probably also from like inside publishing, but maybe it has not been as overt, um, is just kind of being pigeonholed into just general South Asian literature, being pigeonholed into being Indian, or being mistaken as being Indian. I've also been, I keep being mistaken as like Asian American. So I will show up in like a bunch of like AAPI lists, and I'm just like, do you understand what AAPI means? Like I like how can I be Asian American if I do not live in America? If I like, oh my God. Anyway, I think this is one of the like the biggest like microaggressions that has happened to me, and it's something that like keeps happening. And I think like probably in publishing, like inside publishing, and nobody has actually said this to me or my agent, but people are probably confused about Bangladesh and Bengali culture, and they probably don't understand it. So they're just like not as willing, or they do that whole thing like, I can't connect with this, or I can't sell this. And part of that is because, Bangladesh doesn't necessarily exist in the larger narrative of publishing. We don't fit into this quite narrow space of South Asian literature that exists there. And obviously, like a lot of South Asia doesn't, because it is very like this very specific Indian narrative that exists there. I do think it's broadening now, but I think there's still like so many people who need to get published for us to truly become diverse. So yeah, I think I would just like, I think if I could go 1 month without somebody tagging me in a review, calling me Indian, that would make me incredibly happy. Just 1 month, that would make me happy.
I'm just girding myself because I expect that that's exactly what's going to happen to me too. Because my book is like still in early stages. It only announced in like October. So I'm not at the point yet where, at least as far as I know, people are like tagging it as Indian. I did see it like it gets tagged as like South Asian and on like Goodreads shelves, and that's fine, whatever for now. But yeah, that's something like, please acknowledge that we exist. Because a lot of people for a very long time have tried to snuff us out and just absorb us into that collective South Asian monolith. And a lot of people have tried for a very long time to destroy our language or culture and all of that. So like we're clinging to that and trying to represent that. So please do acknowledge that.
Yeah, and I think especially after like not having a space in publishing, like I always say that, like, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure Sabina Khan was the first Bangladeshi person to publish a book in YA in the North American market, and that was when did her book come out? 2019, right? So that is so recent, and I was the second in 2020. Tashi is going to be the third author. And then you're going to be the fourth,
Yeah,
so it's just such a, sorry?
I said we don't even have a top 5. It's 4 people, so.
It's just, oh, I guess if we add K and if we expand it to Kidlit in general, then Karuna Riazi, then we'll have a top 5. But it's sad, right?
I know Karuna writes with YA, so here's hoping that, she will be 5 in YA as well anyways, sometime soon.
Yes, I hope so. Yeah, it is like, I just think it feels often like, I mean, I don't know how connected everybody is to like Bangladesh and their Bengali culture, but I know for me, because everybody has a different diaspora experience, and that is perfectly valid. Not everybody has to be like Bangladesh all the time. But for me, I did grow up in Bangladesh, and I do feel very connected to it just because I've visited it so often as well, even after I came to Ireland. So for me, it often feels like, I've like carved out this space for myself as a Bangladeshi person, finally. And I've carved out the space where I can kind of talk about Bangladesh and these Bangladeshi characters that I've created, who also have a specific connection to their culture and to their heritage and their language. And then people are constantly like, oh, they're Indian, or you're Indian. So it is like, it's quite violent.
Yeah, definitely. I agree there. It just like perpetuates and a lot of like the colonial mindset. And it's not always just done by outsiders. Oftentimes, it'll be done with like, South Asian bloggers of other. And, I really respect the blogging community who supports authors of color, because I think that they're sometimes the only people who do. But at the same time, that's just something that you have to be like really careful about, because we talk about how representation matters so much, and that's something that matters, the specific nuances of people's identities, and for those to be celebrated, particularly if the author is choosing to celebrate them, that we don't erase that.
Mm-hmm. The next question is, I would love to hear some common greetings in Bengali and a little more about the language martyrs. We already kind of spoke about the language martyrs in quite a lot of detail. We don't really have any common greetings in Bengali, which I think it seems very strange to people when I say that, because whenever somebody wants to learn new language, they're like, how do you say hello? And I'm just like, I don't know. We don't say hello. But the reason for that is because Bengalis are so connected to their religion. So if you are like a Muslim Bengali, you say hello in Arabic, which is Assalamu alaikum. And if you're Hindu, you will say it in, Hindi, you will say Namaste. And probably if you're from another religion, you will say it in that other religion. And actually, honestly, like this is very common, right? Because in Irish, the way that we say hello is basically the same as Assalamu alaikum, but in Irish, because we say like Diagwich, which means may God be with you. So I think this is pretty common across the world. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. There's just a lot of stuff that I think about how we don't actually have it as a common part of our language. Like, for example, when people talk about like just in general, like representation of like South Asian parents, and like, they'll talk about like, oh, my parents never said I love you to me. They showed it in different ways, but they didn't really say it. And then I like stop and think about it, and I'm like, is there a way that Bengalis say I love you that isn't romantic? I can't think of it. So Ami tumare balobashi or Ami tumake balobashi is romantic in context. We don't have I love you in that platonic context. So then like, how can they say something to you that doesn't, I can't speak for other South Asian languages, but I just mean in like a Bengali context. How can they say that to you? They don't have that. As part of their, for them, it may not feel natural to say, I love you in English when that's not their first language. So then they show you they love you in like different ways. And I think
never thought of that before.
I actually have thought about that only because like, it seems to be actually Asian representation in general, where there's like frequently like parental conflict as part of the plot. And that's fine. I think that's actually really realistic. And I also like tackle that in my debut. Because I think that, relationships between your immigrant parents and diaspora children can be very complicated. But that's something that I see come up a lot, like, oh, my parent, doesn't say I love you. So then that made me wonder about our specific language. And if we even have the word I love, a sentence for I love you that's platonic. And I thought we don't. So then I'm like, maybe I'm wondering now about these other Asian contexts. Like, do your parents have the language to be able to tell you that, or are we putting like Western views on them and trying to like push them to conform to something that isn't natural to them, and they show you in different ways? So
it's a good question.
No way to know, because Asia is even bigger than Bangladesh, and Bangladesh alone has dialects. So it's big with a lot of languages.
Yeah, I don't know if you have any other greetings, like other than just like hello and whatever religion we practice.
A lot, and it's basically just means like, what are you doing? But it's kind of
sorry?
Kitahoro, or at least Siletis will say like Kitahoro, which like means what are you doing, but it's not that rude. It's more like how are you, phrased as what are you doing. So there's that.
Yeah, but like I think in Shuddho, like you would just be like yeah, like just saying how are you, like Kamonacho or Ki Khobor, again, like it would directly translates to what's the news, but it basically means like what's up, yeah.
Maybe like Balo Asoni, which means are you good, basically. And that's about it. So yeah.
Okay, I'd love to hear more about the fight for your language. We've already spoken about that. Favorite Bangladeshi sweets or cakes. We really covered that a lot in our tier video. I'd love to hear about the people from Bangladesh's history that you think are the coolest.
I think we touched on the literary examples a lot. And then you kind of talked about like Sheikh Mujib and his family. So Sheikh Mujib was our found.
Would we say that they are cool?
I don't know if they're cool. I don't know if they're cool.
I
They're
definitely would not use that word.
I don't know. I don't know if I stop and I think a lot that many people are cool. So
Yeah, I think what people have to realize is that Bangladesh's history is Bangladesh is 50 years old. My dad is over 50 years old, and so is my mom, actually. Um,
both of my
so
parents.
yeah. So technically Bangladesh's historical figures are my parents, because they are a part of Bangladesh's history. They remember our independence, our War of Independence. They remember like the famine that happened after our War of Independence. So they have like all of these memories of history in Bangladesh, but really it's very present. So actually, like when we think of like historical figures in Bangladesh, the first people that I think of are like my great uncles who have told me stories about what they did during the War of Independence or during the language movement and like the parts that they played in it. And they will often even say like, oh, this is what like the history books say, but this is actually what happened because they were literally there. So yeah, like when I think of Bangladesh's history, I literally think about my family members.
Yeah, our past is just very ingrained in our present. So, you can talk about the founding family, but then you have to get into like things that are still going on in the present that are very complicated, and you can't necessarily, as Adiba said, label them as cool all the time because of some things. So yeah, there's a lot of like our people were freedom fighters, and they did that through guerrilla warfare because they didn't have the same resources as the Pakistani military. So you really just have to imagine that it was like civilians versus military. And we did have some help from India at the time, eventually. But so I would say like a lot of just the general population of the time who fought back through guerrilla warfare, fought back against like pillagers and rapists and other terrible things that happened there. Just they could be like your uncles, and they're just people in our family. And so it's not what they did was pretty cool, yeah, but it's hard to discuss them in the same scope.
I know Bangladesh used to be a part of Pakistan, but I never looked into why independence was necessary.
We talked about that a little bit too, right?
A little bit, yes, but um, yeah, I think like the biggest thing is that, well, what we talked about was how, India was partitioned into um, Pakistan and India, and Pakistan was East Pakistan, which is Bangladesh now, and West Pakistan, which is Pakistan. And the reason for the partition was because Bangladesh was Muslim majority, and so they literally divided between Hindus and Muslims. But obviously, this created a lot of complications because the Bengal region, we all share like culture, language, etc. We were divided into two, but also it created problems for other like minorities and marginalized people because like Sikhs, I should say religious minorities and ethnic minorities, they were like, where are we supposed to go, because they didn't get a country to go to. So it was very complicated. It was very brutal. The partition resulted in the largest migration in all of history to this day that I know of. It resulted in a lot of people being killed because people from either side would be killing each other when they were moving to Pakistan or to India, or when they didn't want to move to Pakistan or India. So it was incredibly brutal. It was like neighbors killing neighbors, etc., etc. It was awful. Thank you, colonialism. Thank you, British people. But After that, what happened with Pakistan and Bangladesh is that Pakistan were also oppressive towards Bangladeshis, because obviously we do have a different culture, we have a different language. So one of the big things that kind of instigated our rebellion was the fact that in Pakistan, they made the national language Urdu, but in what was East Pakistan then and is Bangladesh now, we do not speak Urdu. We speak Bangla, but we couldn't recognize that as our national language. So this is really what like instigated the language movement and resulted in all the brutality for that. But there was also like just other things. We weren't being represented in the government. We didn't feel like our voice was heard. And obviously, like if you look at a map of Pakistan and Bangladesh, you will see we have an entire country between us. So that makes things a little bit difficult. So because of that also, like it was just very difficult for us to have our voice heard. We were marginalized, we were oppressed. Yeah, do you want to, I think there are a few blanks there. Do you want to fill those in?
I think you covered most of it. We talked before about how Bangladesh has closer ties to its Hindu roots. And that was part of the reason as well that Pakistanis thought that that needed to be kind of wiped out. And so they needed to be in control of us for that reason, because they didn't think that we were properly Muslim. Yeah, I would say I think you mostly covered it. So it is just like it's a geographic failing on the part of the British, and it didn't just affect those three nations. They basically, like when they did the partition of India, they put a lot of countries into like that were originally independent nations that could just kind of shoehorn them into India. So you have a lot of like different languages and such in you know, like India alone, and different cultures and so on. And it all stems back to this original partition from the British. And so, you know, not to get too political on here, but a certain someone died recently, and a certain someone else said, oh, you know, he did great things for his colonies and so on. No, he did not. No, he did not. No, they did not. They did, you know, we had a very like incredibly rich nation, like, you know, the Bengal. It was very rich in land and resources, everything. And it was an incredibly wealthy place. And then they came and they kind of like just bled us dry. And then they left and they said, okay, you're going to be part of this country that's a whole other country away now. And that created a lot of difficulties for us that to this day, we are still dealing with the ripple effects of. And if you look at the political situation in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh now, a lot of it stems from that initial partition. You hear about like anti-Muslim sentiment, anti-Hindu sentiment in places that are majority Muslim, and it's really terrible right now. If you look at the politics of specific places where, like, you know, Muslims are being like set on fire in India, and then you have like the Kashmir conflict and so on. So all of that stems back to the helpful British. So thank you for that, British people. Thank you, Prince Philip, or whatever your name is.
Yeah, I think it's Prince Philip, yes. He is like double the age of Bangladesh, so that really tells you everything you need to know. We should also say like our war of independence was very brutal because obviously we like Pri said before, we didn't have the weapons that the Pakistanis did, but you know, there was a lot of war crimes committed against us. There was a genocide committed against us. Millions of Bangladeshi people died. And by the way, before this genocide, there was another genocide in the Bengals, which was caused by Churchill, a man-made genocide where he used burnt earth policies because he didn't want the Japanese to come and take over India during World War II. So we had our first genocide because of Churchill, our second genocide because of Pakistan, and then after our war of independence, we had a famine, which was, you know, because of everything that came before this famine. So this is just like, in recent history, like this is stuff that like my dad obviously remembers the famine. He has very, very stark memories of the famine. And he also remembers the War of Independence. He was a kid during that. He does not remember the famine in the Bengals before that. He was a little like it was a little after his or before his time, but probably like my grandfather does. So that is how recent these three things are, and this is not even all of the brutality that has happened to the Bengals and the Bangladesh in recent history.
Yeah, so I think up until only very recently, we were considered like one of the poorest countries in the world. And it's because we've had so many colonizers within and without who have bled our country dry of resources. And during World War II, a part of it as well was that they would take rice and food from Bangladesh and bring it to England to make sure that, you know, white people in England were being fed during the war and that they were sending food out to the soldiers fighting. Meanwhile, our people were starving and dying. And Churchill said, well, maybe they shouldn't have had as many children. So, you know, whenever you romanticize people like Churchill or, you know, your British breakfast tea or whatever, just know that we are internally judging you because you need to learn your history and the part that your ancestors played in the oppression of ours.
Honestly, not even our ancestors. The part that like your grandfather played in murdering our grandfathers. Well, my grandfather was not murdered, but you get the idea.
Yeah, and I believe like Prince Philip even like had a lot of remorse about the independence of India and whatever. So like,
yeah,
we don't cry over Prince Philip.
The British are like, oh, the India was like the crown jewel of the empire, and it's like, and then you stole everything that India had. So obviously it was the crown jewel of India because you or of the British Empire because you stole everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And on that note, they actually created a lot of the original Hindu versus Muslim tensions because when they went, they basically told the Hindu people there that, oh, you know, the Muslims, they tried to like, you know, they tried to conquer you. We are not here as conquerors. We want to be here as like people who just live here like you. And we basically, they sowed this division by taking one side against the other. Which is a really easy way. Like it's a tool of war to be able to like go into a place and try to sow division between people who are otherwise working together.
I mean, it's still happening now because we see like the fact that like systemic racism and just discrimination in general is fueled by dividing people. Like how, you know, a lot of the anti Asian hate hashtags and stuff are filled with like anti-blackness. It's because, you know, white supremacy has taught us that we need to blame each other for this. So yeah, it's like it's a big problem.
So yeah, thanks for all your questions, everybody. There were a lot of
thank you so much. We loved talking about, you know, Bangladesh and answering all your questions, and we really hope that you learned something.
My name is Priyanka Taslim, and my book, my young adult romantic comedy debut, is going to be releasing from Simon & Schuster, specifically from the imprint Salam Reads, and it's called The Love Match. It is about a girl whose meddling mother decides to set her up with the perfect Bangladeshi boy. And it's very diaspora. It takes place in my hometown, which I mentioned before. But at the same time, she starts catching feelings for another Bangladeshi boy who starts working with her. So that's my book. You can add it on Goodreads, and hopefully other news will follow.
I'm Adiba Jaigirdar, and I am the author of The Henna Wars. But my next book, which is out May 25th in the US and May 27th in UK and Ireland, is Honey and Issue's Guide to Fake Dating. It's about Honey and Issue, these two Bengali girls, and they decide to fake date Honey because she feels like she needs to validate her bisexuality to her friends, Issue because she wants to become head girl and impress her parents. And as their fake dating turns into something real, they need to figure out if they're willing to make a few sacrifices in order to get there happily ever after. So, if you watch this video and you thought you want to support Bangladeshi people, or you want to learn a little bit more about Bangladesh, our books are good books to pick up because they do feature Bangladeshi protagonists, and we are two Bangladeshi authors. So to finish off, it is Boishak, Poila Boishak, which is the Bengali New Year. So, Shubho Noboborsho, which is Happy New Year in Bangla. We hope you have a good Bengali New Year, and we really hope you enjoyed watching this video. Bye.
Bye. Thank you again.